So China is an easy target, you know, because it is building a new coal fire station every 5 days and increasing the power generating capacity each year by roughly the same of the total capacity of Britain. So there's no question that China is just steamrolling along with this huge coal-fired powering, and everybody's wagging their fingers at them. But we also heard Mr. Rickman this morning saying, we've got to do something about it. Well, Hu Jintao did say something about it when he was at the G8. He says, considering both historical responsibility and current capability, developed countries should take the lead in reducing carbon emissions and help developing countries to ease and adapt to climate change. Now, what he's actually saying is that you pay for it if you want. Now, there might be new technologies. There could be carbon capture, it could be storage, it could be all these new technologies, or even less sophisticated technologies that we have heard about that are supposedly working. But who's going to pay for it? Fine. And Mr. Rickman did, in fact, allude to it and said, we've got to do something about it. Now, that, I guarantee you, will be the last we'll hear of it. Nobody is going to pay for it in China. Nobody. I will challenge you to find anybody paying any significant money towards China in order to help it to be green. All you might is to persuade a bank to finance it, and is not giving, is financing perhaps. It's a very difficult process. I'm just telling you the realities of life. And there's no point being theoretical when you are not dealing with realities. Now, China has already overtaken the US in being the single emitter of CO2. And I have to say that the point has already been made that you think that China is going to have a greater consciousness of the environment and so forth. Let me tell you, I've lived in China. I go to China every 2 weeks. It ain't true. This is not the priority of my country and my countrymen, and certainly not the Communist Party. When Hu Jintao wakes up, the environment is fairly low down on his agenda, I can assure you. And it is, however, about the rapid growth and development of an economy, how to feed the 80% of people who live in the rural area, how to stop them from coming to see the urban lights, and how for China to prevent social upheaval and political upheaval by giving people employment. So I say it's quite easy, it's all very well for us within the cozy confines of huge companies like BT, which has been mentioned, saying saving 230 million. Do you know how much they make? They make billions. Of course they can afford it. To talk about market initiatives and winning policies, or even within these fancy conference walls, and even for executives to pat themselves on the back. But I'm afraid that none of it is meaningful unless there's a net effect. Now, as I said, don't get me wrong. I'm all for being clean and green and environmentally responsible. I'm completely in favor of showing respect to nature. I would be an idiot not to do so, and I would be uncivilized not to do so. What I am saying, however, is that our fight against CO2 emissions by way of all these things that we are saying has got to be done from a global perspective. We already said the word global, and there is no point just saying it, it's appreciating how we're going to achieve it. And I might also say this, is that actually CO2 is the only thing that we talk about, and yet it is only accountable for 30% of the greenhouse gas effect on Earth. 30. Significant, but it is the only thing you talk about. What's the other most important science within that greenhouse gas emission, which is all important according to the global warming people? Is water vapor, is clouds. We don't, anybody heard works on clouds? Anybody been on, I mean, a cloud line perhaps, but I mean, nobody talks about clouds. That actually is considerably more important than CO2. And do you know what? Plants need CO2. I'm sure WWF will tell you that. But of course, he's going to disagree with almost everything else I say. So what I'm saying is this, is that we've got to just stand back and have a look at this question of proportion and perspective. Now, thankfully, the vice chairman of IPCC, whose name I see, is not coming until tomorrow, by which time I've gone back to London. But this IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, which is now the sacred Bible, I really didn't want to read it because it looked very convoluted. But I couldn't resist. I resisted it for 6 months. But I hear about it ad nauseam. And so I picked it up and I actually went through it. Not thoroughly, but fairly thoroughly. And I was amazed. Now don't forget that this IPCC document, it does not carry out scientific research itself. It collates information. I don't know who collates it. I don't know whether they're scientists or what. But there are some very questionable things that I find fundamental, not just, you know, issues of whether you cheat a little bit with statistics or not. In the entire IPCC report, in any of them, it specifically says it makes no reference to human adaptation. Does that make sense to you, that you can do a report on Earth and you are going to predict what is going to happen, and you say we're not going to pay any attention to what human adaptation is going to bring in? And I'll tell you the other thing. Every single model you have seen so far, and every single model you will see, is all on computerized models. Now, as a scientist, I remember Karl Popper, when I was at university, the great philosopher of science. He says that for any theory to be genuinely scientific, its predictions have to be falsifiable by evidence in the real world. Now, who is going to falsify a chart that predicts what is going to happen in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years, in 100 years? Indeed, I'll put it another way. Who is going to say that what has been scientifically proven is not right? Nobody has come up to me and said, by the way, I'm going to show you that there's something wrong. Well, I can tell you one very minor example. This century, no climate, no global warming. 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. What people now are saying is that in the last 11 of the last 12 years, we have had the highest temperatures. It's like saying, at the turn of the century, since the turn of the century, we have had no population growth. So in the last 12 years, we have had the highest number of people on Earth. It is slightly misleading, I have to tell you. So I get slightly annoyed, but only as an individual, not as an expert. The methodology, climate change, temperatures, where do you think they come from? They are collated from hundreds and thousands of temperature gauges around the world. How do we know that they are calibrated properly? We might be able to believe ones in America, but how about Mexico? How are some of the Central Asian countries? Some of the communist countries? Now, we are depending on all these numbers in order to arrive at a number which will tell you the average temperature. So in methodology, in science, we have a question mark.